a lot of the M&E tools, this is not to bastardize them, but I think that a lot of them are out of touch and not in sync with, community realities and need. Shift the power is a concept whose time has come. You see that mostly all the tools, approaches, paradigms that we are using in the global south, most of them have come from, the global north.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching another episode from the West Africa Civil Society Institute. In this episode, we will be discussing a very important topical issue. It is one that is among a series of discussions aimed at exploring how consultants within the civil society space can contribute to the shift the power agenda in West Africa. And today we are bringing one of WACSeries authors to our WACSeries publications, Mr. Gervin Chanase, who has authored several pieces around the theme Shift the Power. In this episode, we will be talking about a topic focusing on shifting the power in monitoring, evaluation, and learning, an exposition of reciprocal ME&L in development programming. Thank you very much, Gervin, for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you very much, Jim, and the entire Waxy team for having me. It's a pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you wear several hats, but just let us know who is this dynamic, wonderful colleague of ours in the civil society sector.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Gervin Chanase, and I think I've been in the social impact space for the last couple of years. I think more than 15 years I've been in this space. I know most people like to say, yes, you're a practitioner in development, but in the spirit of shift the power, I tend to refrain from using that term. I've worked in various capacities and roles within the space as an M&E officer, programs officer, advocacy, work with civil society organizations across, Ghana and West Africa. And these days, I also do a lot of consultancy work in the global south, what you call the majority world, and also um, in the more like developed Western part of the globe. So I am also pursuing a doctorate degree in international development at Dr. Friedrich University of Bamberg, where I'm looking at the relationship between international donors and local NGOs and how this affects their agency in facilitating participation of citizens in local government. So this is just something brief about myself. Yeah. And yeah, I've written a lot of pieces on thought leadership, mostly focusing on shift the power.
And just building on that, why the interest in, that thought leadership positioning around shift the power?
Well, I think that shift the power is a concept whose time has come. It looks like it's the buzzword that is happening. I feel that for a long time, if we look at um, knowledge, I think that there's been a lot of epistemological injustice. And why do I say that? You see that mostly all the tools, approaches, paradigms that we are using in the global south, most of them have come from, the global north. And I feel that um, African or, authors from the global south, be it from Asia or Latin America, have been kind of underrepresented. So I see that there's a lot of opportunity for us, to start writing our own narratives and our own stories about how we can bring about a redistribution of power within the development space. So that's what got me interested in this space.
That is a really interesting perspective. And in one of your numerous contributions to the work series, there is this particular piece on shifting the power in monitoring, evaluation, and learning, an exposition of reciprocal MEL in development programming. Let us zoom what you define as reciprocal MEL. What is that concept all about?
I think that to put it in perspective, I will need to just give a little background that will help us to really unpack what reciprocal MAE is. I think if you've been following the debates and conversations on Shift the Power, a lot of it has to do with, the relationship between donors and, so-called recipients. Most of it has focused on programming and operational aspects. But I think one area where power is really entrenched is in the sphere of monitoring and evaluation. And so I sat down, I was like, that we have to do something about this because I sat down and was like, um, if we truly want to, redistribute power, we need to look at how monitoring evaluation is done. And one of the ideas that came into my head was that if you sit down and listen closely and look at societies, there's no single society on earth that does not have a sense of monitoring and evaluation. But how come that the field is dominated by Western epidemiologists, epistemology? And I was like, why is it that almost all the knowledge products, the tools, the templates, the systems that we are using for MAE, they are all top down and brought down from, the global north. And so I mean, upon sober reflection, I was like, why don't we engineer a process where we can reverse this? And I was reading and I came across an article on progressive funding. And there was one of the funding mechanisms that struck chord with me. And that funding mechanism was about reversed funding. And here in reverse funding, I think it was simply a kind of process or funding modality where the local communities decide, they think about their priorities, they problematize, they define their problems, and then they go into the global aid market space looking for what I call suitors or potential partners who can then come on board, to help them to address these challenges. So I applied that concept to monitoring and evaluation, and I was like, how about if there's a reversal of the roles between donors and local communities or local NGOs in the global south, whereby these, be it local communities or local partners, decide the approach they want to use for their M&E. So it is in the way you can also call it reversed M&E. And I said that we can link this um, to development programming in a sense that here, when these communities go in the global market space looking for potential partners, can they, as a matter of urgency, also include the kind of MAE approach they want to adopt, the kind of MAE they want to do as part of the package, and not just only looking for funding? And I believe that when this is done, they will take over the leadership and then they would implement MAE according to their own pace and their own contextual realities. And I believe that that would, in a way, empower them and help them to really measure and define change according to their own living circumstances and realities, and according to systems, protocols, and templates that are culturally relevant. And I believe in doing so, that will bring some kind of dignity to them. So this is what birthed the whole idea of reciprocal monitoring and evaluation.
This really sounds very innovative, and thanks for generating this concept in this very brilliant paper, which I encourage our viewers to read by clicking on the link in the chat. In section 3 of this paper, you use that opportunity to further elaborate on the rationale behind this concept. And I'll just take an excerpt from there. You say on page 5, you say, this power dynamic perpetuates a cycle of dependency, hindering the local organization's long-term ability to develop and engender a strong M&E system and culture.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about this position that you've taken in this paper?
I believe that, a lot of the M&E tools, this is not to bastardize them, but I think that a lot of them are out of touch and not in sync with, community realities and needs, right? They sound so, a lot of them are complicated and very complex. And only a few people who have some level of, education can truly use them. And so this kind of alienates the communities to be part of the M&E process. So they are more like very passive actors when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. If we are talking about truly shifting the power, we need to start speaking in a language that the communities understand. And by a language, I'm talking about the discourse of M&E has to be decoded and simplified in a manner that communities can appreciate, can take ownership, and then they can lead. And I think the best way is that the communities themselves have to be the originators of these kind of innovations. And I think that if you look at, for example, in Latin America, African and Asian communities, they all have their ways of doing, of measuring things, of tracking, of evaluating whether something is good, whether something is, there's value for money in something, or whether that thing is beneficial and relevant. So I'm asking, why don't we start tapping in these? Why don't we start cultivating these? Why don't we start nurturing these paradigms, these approaches, these methodologies, these ways of measuring, these ways of tracking, these ways of learning, and giving them the same kind of premium that we are giving to the already or the existing tools that we have. And I believe that when we do this way, then we can highlight the agency of these communities. And so that's what that whole text was all about.
Thank you very much, Gervin. In your submission, you asked the very important question: why don't we? Why don't we? Why don't we? And I really, when we appreciate the work of diverse actors in the space, the donors, capacity strengthening providers or facilitators like the West Africa Civil Society Institute and others across West Africa. But there are equally very important and indispensable players like yourself, consultants, independent actors who are either working independently or collaborating with some of these diverse stakeholders to advance, the shift the power agenda. And now, leveraging this situation that you have painted, what critical things can consultants in West Africa do to really make sure that they are facilitators, catalysts of actions that will lead to a veritable shift in power in the next 3, 5, 10 years in our region? What is your take on that?
I think that, first of all, look, consultants cannot do this alone, even though they have a lot of leeway to influence the process. I think that partners like WACSeries, Star Ghana, KFDC, and the rest have a big role to play here, because mostly the templates for these kind of consultancies are given by who? They're given by these people, these organizations that you just mentioned. So if an organization should come with a terms of reference that does not promote or does not give room for flexibility and reflexivity and also for innovation, no consultant would be able to do this, to bring a more radical or forceful approach. Immediately that proposal would be rejected. So a lot of consultants have to play by the book. So it has to begin with how these terms of references, expressions of interest, are phrased. So the caveat that these can be phrased in a manner that encourages people to experiment to be indigenous in their thinking, then there's a lot of space. And I also think that consultants have to also start um, nurturing and sorry for that. Consultants have to also start being forceful in the kind of approaches they recommend for doing monitoring and evaluation. And I think one thing about consultants is that we need to, as a matter of fact, put communities at the center of everything that we are doing. I feel that in a lot of consultancies, you don't really see the agency of communities in the consultancy, because either the consultant wants to show that he can really do the work, or maybe these consultants, for lack of a better word, do not have adequate knowledge of some of these approaches. So first they have to, go back and see what kind of approaches they can distill from the community and how these approaches can be, used. Secondly, they have to also use their consultancies to talk about these approaches, to bring to light these approaches. And I feel that if these approaches, some of them are refined, tested, then they can be adapted. And I believe that consultancies would be, consultants would be some of those, actors who can, highlight a number of these approaches. But I think it's not um, consultants alone, like I mentioned at the beginning, cannot do it by themselves. This has to be a kind of a joint um, partnership, or um, a joint yes, joint partnership between between partners like WACSeries and the Star Garners, and then these consultants. And I think that eventually we'll be able to make some inroads in this regard.
That is quite insightful, and that takes me to the recommendation section. There is really a powerful statement there that says local communities need to acknowledge and tap into the wealth of knowledge embedded in their indigenous knowledge systems. This represents a treasure trove of ideas and methodologies for monitoring and evaluation. Now, how can consultants tap into this existing opportunity that might sometimes be overlooked to make sure that they are critical actors towards driving shift the power in our communities and region?
I think that consultants would have to take a step back. Mostly they pride themselves as being experts, but being an expert does not mean that you are not open to learning, or there's no reciprocity between you and the community. When I talk about reciprocity, it has to be some kind of exchange. And I think that you can only be a good consultant if you are open to learning from the communities. And so I feel that a lot of consultants would have to go back to the basics, sit with communities, learn from them, distill information. Some of these paradigms and knowledge products that these communities have may not be maybe raw, so they need to be refined, they need to be standardized, and made fit for purpose. So how do consultants do this? And I think that consultants have that unique opportunity to also incubate and test some of these um, approaches. And I think that for consultants not to be boxed or be encumbered by, you know, terms of references and expressions of interest that are so rigid, maybe they can also seek for independent funding, or mobilize their own resources to test some of these products, or look for partners who are willing to experiment with these approaches. And I think that we also have to start documenting them. When I birthed this idea, I was like, maybe it may sound gibberish or stupid, or, for lack of a better way, it don't make sense to some people, but we need to believe in our ideas and see how they see the end of the lake, how they see the light of day. And I so so what I mean is they need to also start documenting these approaches. And I think that partners and actors like Waxy, Stardana, KCDF would need to be very flexible in their approach, because it's one thing asking consultants to be flexible in their approach, to be innovative, to help shift the power. But if you're also rigid in the kind of templates and things that you want consultants to do, I don't think that it's really fair, and that would no consultant, people for fear of going hungry, would want to toe that line. So there has to be that understanding, if I can put it.
Thank you so much, Gervin Chanase. It's always a pleasure reading your thought pieces. And for colleagues who are watching this episode, feel free to visit the West Africa Civil Society Institute's website and read the article "Shifting the Power in Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning: An Exposition of Reciprocal MEL in Development Programming." And Gervin boldly states that consultants need to deprive themselves from being experts. And as consultants, you can only be a good consultant by learning from communities. Dear viewers, dear listeners, what does that mean to you? What experience do you have? Feel free to share in the comment section, and let's continue engaging. And importantly, Gervin strongly recommends, that we should document our experiences, document the approaches we are testing, and let others learn from it. And the West Africa Civil Society Institute is right here to welcome your ideas and make sure that together we document every practice that we are trying out, we are implementing anywhere in West Africa. Write to research@waxy.org. You will find the email on this video, and we will accompany you along this journey, because together we want to see more actors who are contributing to document what's happening in the development space in the region. Gervin, before I leave you, what is that one thing you will want any viewer of this video to read this article or this paper, because they need to capture that from this paper?
Well, there's so many things that I put in there, but one thing I want you to just viewers to remember is that every community knows what it needs, it wants to measure. And so we need to really go back to distill these things that communities are doing in their own natural way, and see how best we can use that in evaluating the progress that you are making. I think that is dignifying, and that it's life altering, and that is something that can bring about shifting power in the sphere of monitoring and evaluation. Thank you.
What a great way to conclude. Thank you so much, Gervin, and we definitely look forward to catching up again with you to discuss any other thought piece that you've put out for civil society actors to explore. Dear viewers, thanks again for watching. I have been your host, Jim Chik Fomunjong, and if you are interested in coming on board any of these conversations in the development space in West Africa, write to communications@waxy.org, and we will definitely be glad to host you in our next episode. Have a wonderful time, and let's know what you think about this piece in the comment section. Thank you, and bye-bye for now. Au revoir.
All right. Very well.